A very warm welcome to this third session of presentation in the second workshop on the pedagogy of signals and systems. I'm very happy to see the enthusiastic participation in making a presentation on the lectures that you're seeing in the course. And I'm also very happy to encourage all of you to participate in the discussions that follow the presentations. Very important for you to participate in the discussions because that adds value to the presentation. And by discussions, I mean, of course, first critically reviewing the presentation that is made. When we critically review one another's presentations, we are not belittling each other or we are not necessarily praising one another. The purpose is to actually identify points by which all of us can gain in our pedagogy in the future. So in fact, if you make mistakes in your presentation and if they are pointed out, you should consider yourself very fortunate because that gives not only you but many others an opportunity to polish their pedagogy of the subject in future. On the other hand, if you make a very good presentation and if you are appreciated for it, you should be as happy, if not happier. That is because it sets a very good example of what kind of an exposition can be considered effective, can be considered meaningful, can be considered appropriate for a student audience. That means both when you have a presentation where you receive a lot of criticism or where you have a presentation where you are praised and appreciated are very useful to you. That does not mean that you must intentionally make a poor presentation. No, I don't mean that. Your presentation must be with enthusiasm, with commitment, and with an aim to give the best pedagogical experience to the audience that we all are. But notwithstanding that, if it happens that you receive some points of criticism for your presentation, you should, as I said, consider yourself very fortunate because you are doing a great service to yourself and others in the process. Now, what kind of criticism, what kind of review should we carry out for the presentations? We already know, but let's repeat some of the points. The review should focus, of course, on the correctness of the concepts. We hope that much of it will be correct. It should also focus on the way the concept has been presented, not to a team of experts like this, but for the benefit of a student who is learning the subject anew. So we must look at it from that point of view. We might hear a presentation of an idea based on my lectures that is correct by itself, but the way it is organized may not really be useful for conveying those ideas to a student audience in a classroom situation, and that should also be pointed out. The third is, it should also be pointed out whether one can improve upon the delivery of some of the ideas that are being presented. And last but not the least, one can offer one's own suggestions for further embellishment and improvement of the presentation. These are the kind of participation points that I would very much look forward to in all the presentations today. And with these few words of introduction and orientation, I now welcome Group 7 to make a presentation on the next lecture. So Group 7.
So good morning everyone. So I am Dr. Manasi Patil from Walchand College of Engineering, Sangli. Basically this subject I have not taught up till now, but I did research in the image processing, basically MRI image processing I have worked into in my PhD. So I'm interested into this subject actually, and so I joined this workshop. So I am trying to learn some fundamentals. I have prepared a very short presentation about the basic things of this lecture. So if anywhere I am going wrong, sir, please correct me. So this is lecture 11, sample and hold as a system. So in this, sir has nicely explained about the process of sampling. In its simplest way, one can express it like multiplying the input signal by a periodic waveform. A signal can be represented more efficiently than its raw form. So when we sample a signal, basically on the left hand side in this figure we can see the continuous time signal, and on the right hand side we can see the periodic signal, so which will be used for the sampling. So basically a signal, when it is sampled, so it becomes a function of, means every point in that sample signal is a function of time, we can say. So a sample signal.
Madam, sorry to interrupt you, but you know, on the right hand side, it's not a periodic signal, it's a discrete version of the same continuous signal obtained by sampling. That's what you probably mean, isn't it?
Yeah, after sampling, right?
Yes. So it's essentially the samples of the signal on the left. That's the way you should say it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So basically, we can represent a raw signal in its efficient way after sampling. So that is the thing, and there are several applications of this, that like when we do analog to digital conversion, because all natural signals are in their analog form, and we need to get them discrete signal by the process of sampling. So then next is the idea of holding. So when we sample a signal, as on in the right hand side we are seeing the sample signal here, discrete time signal, right? Left hand side it was a continuous time analog signal, and right hand side it is a discrete time signal. Now if we look at this signal, we get various samples, like we have one sample at -2 TS, we have one sample at -TS, and so on. Now what about the area in between? Okay, what we have number of points after sampling, we get the number of points here. Now what about the in between the points? What we should put into the in between area? So this is nothing but the interpolation. How to fill this gap? This is called as a interpolation, and one of the method of interpolation, we can call it as a holding, right? So here we can see this, whatever the signal obtained at point -2 TS, that has been held up to -TS, the green horizontal line. Then again the same thing continues, and whatever is the green here, that is the hold signal, that is showing us a hold signal. So this is the one way of interpolation, that is one way of filling the gaps of sample points, that is nothing but the hold. So there are several methods of interpolation actually. So the method of filling up the region in between the sampling points, that is completing the waveform between the samples. So one idea is sample and hold. Then second idea could be linear interpolation. And in DSP, there are number of methods of interpolation, advanced methods of interpolation that we can go through. So linear interpolation, that has been shown in this next figure. So here, if we look at this red line, whatever shown here, just joining the points, sample points linearly by a line. So then whatever this filling the gaps happen, it is called as linear interpolation. So this diagram shows us two methods of interpolation. Green one is the sample and hold method, and red shown in this, that is the linear interpolation. So this is the total idea of holding and interpolation. So holding as one method of interpolation that we can visualize here. Then going ahead, the frequency domain analysis of hold, the frequency domain analysis of hold signal, or that we are interested in. So this is our basic analog signal, that is our natural signal x of t in the time domain. Then we want to pass it through a sampler. So this picture shows us this x of t, we are passing through the sampler, ideal sampler. Then we get a sampled signal xs of t, and then this xs of t we are passing through a linear shift invariant system, LSI. And at the end we will obtain a xh of t, that is the hold signal. So we want to do the analysis of this system, okay, sample and hold system. So we are going to see now the signals xt, xs of t, that is a sample signal, and xh of t. So in the frequency domain, basically sampling is nothing but multiplying the Fourier transform of xs of t with the frequency response of that system, and then the whatever the obtained output xh of t, that is integrable one, and that shows that the system is stable. So here in this diagram we can see xt is an analog signal, then red points, they are showing the xs of t, that is a sample signal, and then we are going to pass this xs of t through a LSI, linear shift invariant system, to obtain the whole signal, right? So next we can see this xs of t, that is this xs of t, that is the sample points or the sample signal that has been passed through a linear shift invariant system, and then we get this whatever in green color, that is the whole signal, which we call as xh of t, right? xh of t. So this is the whole signal. And then coming to the process of a whole signal, that is the impulse response of the system, we can see it is a integrable, and the multiplication mathematical things further I have not gone into. Sir can focus on this. So this much I could do. Thank you, sir.
So thank you, Professor Patil, very nicely presented. So some important points that we should observe here in a sample and hold system include a sample and hold system, for that matter, a sample followed by an interpolation system is typically a concatenation of an ideal sampler with a linear shift invariant system. So as Professor Manasi Patil presented towards the end of her presentation, if you take a sample and hold, there is an ideal sampler followed by a linear shift invariant whose impulse response, a linear shift invariant system whose impulse response is constant for the pulse, for the duration of the sampling interval, starting from the point of sampling up to the next point where the next sample comes. So you see, the effect is now going to be to subject the spectrum of the sample signal to the frequency response of that linear shift invariant system. This impulse response, which is a rectangular pulse over an interval of the sampling interval, definitely has a Fourier transform. So this system has a frequency response. And in fact, the frequency response would be of a sine f by f kind of pattern, a sinc pattern. Now, I would have liked to see this also being presented by Professor Manasi Patil. This part was missed, or is it there in the next presentation? Are we going to deal with it in the next presentation in lecture 12? Probably, I think.
Yes, I will try, sir.
Yeah, no, but I'm just wondering. Anyway, so, okay, so Professor Ashish is asking to repeat once more. See, what I said was, when I take a sample and hold, as Professor Manasi Patil said, it is equivalent to first ideally sampling, followed by a linear shift invariant system whose impulse response is essentially a pulse which lasts from 0 up to sampling time. And therefore, every impulse there in the ideal sampler is converted to a pulse which lasts throughout the sampling interval. And the strength of the pulse or the height of the pulse is of course equal to the sample value. Of course, the impulse response is a unit pulse. So it gets multiplied by the sample value when the impulse is fed. Each of the impulses corresponding to the natural sampler is fed to this linear shift invariant system. It comes out as a pulse with duration equal to the sampling time and beginning equal to the point at which sampling has happened. And therefore, it's a held signal. Similarly, one could write down a linear shift invariant system for the linear interpolator. And in fact, I would encourage you to do it as an exercise. write down a linear shift
Yes.
invariant system which corresponds to the linear interpolator as well, right? Now, the point here is that this linear shift invariant system is therefore going to distort the spectrum of the sample signal, and that distortion is also going to be felt in the baseband, that means in the original signal spectrum. And therefore, when you reconstruct a signal from a sampled and held signal, you need to take this into account in some way, either by equalization or by any other approach that would ensure that you are conscious about the fact that if you simply take the sampled and held signal, there is a frequency domain distortion, there is a spectral distortion. All right. Any other observations or comments on this presentation? Yes.
I have one clarification, sir. Myself, Anandi. So,
yes.
Sir, X into HT, is, they have mentioned one slide, and then in the presentation, X into HT is given. That is stable. It is given. Whether it is it is actually convolution, right, sir? X into HT. It is a time domain. It is convolved with the impulse and impulse response, and its input is convolved with the impulse response of the system. Am I right, sir?
Yeah, that's right. The sample signal would be convolved with the impulse response of that whole linear shift invariance.
Yes.
And when you convolve, what is going to happen is each of the impulses coming out of the ideal sampler will be replaced by the impulse response appropriately shifted and scaled by the strength of the impulse. And therefore, you would get pulses with height equal to the sample value starting from the beginning of each sample interval where the sample appears up to the point where the next sample appears. And that is that effectively is a sample and hold output. You see, is that clear, Ananti, Professor Ananti?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And therefore, you need to see the frequency domain effect of this. Yeah, all right. Any other comments or questions or clarifications or observations on this presentation? All right, if there are none, then we'll proceed to the next presentation, which I believe will be by group 8 on lecture 12.
Good morning, sir. I am Jayanti.
Yes, a very good morning to you.
Sir, I am going to present lecture 12, sampling the linear interpretation. Shall I present, sir?
Yes, please do.
Okay, good morning to one and all present here. We group members, group number 8, sampling by linear interpolation. So actually, as ma'am told, like we have two methods of sampling, sample and hold and linear interpolation. The drawbacks of the sample and hold circuit is distortion in the original spectrum. Also, analysis also passes through the circuit partially. So the linear interpolation is nothing but joining the sample points in a straight line. Like this is the graph. This is the red dots are sampling points and black lines are the interpolating curve. So sampling points, so that is connecting the joining the sample points so that it will form a straight line. So this is nothing but an interpolating curve. So this is nothing but interpolation, linear interpolation. So linear interpolation is the interpolation in which the interpolation curve between any two sample points is a straight line joining between the 2 points. So again I'm repeating, red points are the sample points and this black joining between two sample points is nothing but interpolating curve. So this is a block diagram. Here the sample signal x of t is passed through an ideal sampler at the sampling interval Ts, which gives output of the ideal sampler is xx of t, and this passes through a LSI system, linear shift invariant systems, gives the interpolated output x L of t. So here the graph is this is a signal interpretation representation. So this is red arrow mark is nothing but your sampling output, that is output of ideal sampler, and this blue original signal is arrow mark with the sine wave. This is a original signal, and this that is black green lines. Green lines nothing but the product of two signals, x of t and xx of t, which means that shifted and scaled impulse of xn of ts into h of t minus nts. So based on the value of n, it can be a either negative integer or positive integer. This is for n minus 1, and this is a spectrum for that is shifted and scaled impulse for n is equal to minus 2, and for n is equal to 0, the interval is from minus ts to plus ts, and this is for n1 up to so on. So this is the interpolated. How the interpolated means here the sampling points xx of t output. So for example, if I am taking this interval 0 to minus ts, the joining we are going to connect this two sample points using a straight line. So this is known as interpolating curve, as we have discussed before. So this is straight line. Similarly, we are going to joining all the sample points so that it is get linearly interpolated. So that is the output of the LSI system. Is this right, sir?
Yes,
Hello?
please go on. Yes, please go on.
Yes, sir.
Quite
Yes, sir.
correct.
Then the Fourier transform of the convolution of two signals, that is Fourier transform of convolution of two signals gives the product of the Fourier transform of the original signals. Like x of t, h of t are the inputs. If you take the convolution, it gives the product of the corresponding Fourier transform of the signal h of j ohm into h of j ohm. So here the convolution. So if you are going to take impulse response, so the impulse response we are going to take a zero order old h of t. If you convert this zero order old itself, it gives the first order old. So convolution of h of t in star is nothing but convolution. So h of t itself, zero order old itself gives the first order old. So this is a graphical representation. So the zero order old here we are taking the impulse response of rectangular pulse centered at the origin minus TSS by 2 to plus TSS by 2. So which convolve we are obtaining the triangular spectrum of a first order. This is a triangular spectrum which you are going to obtain for this first order fold. So there is a frequency response of the zero order old. So this is, so actually I have said the product of the Fourier transform of the convolution signal gives the product of the Fourier transform of the original signal. So finally the frequency response of linear shift invariant is nothing but the Fourier transform of the triangular signal, that is the square of the frequency response of the zero order old. So this is the frequency response of zero order old. If you take square, this gets cancelled. So this exponential gets cancelled out. So there is no, so finally the TS, if you want to square this, TS square and sine of TS divided by 2 divided by TS by 2 the whole square. So this is the output of the first order hold, frequency response of first order hold. So this is a frequency response. From this frequency response, there is a magnitude. We have actually the frequency response of this signal is nothing but it has two parts. One is good part is nothing but the side lobes are lesser because of the value of sin c function. It has a maximum value of 1. So the squaring the sin c function will result in the reduction of the magnitude. This the good part is nothing but the side lobes are lower. Similarly, the bad part is nothing but the main lobe too gets steeper along with this part. So that's what sir inferred also. The suffering part is this one. Red lines are suffering part, whereas the squaring, the side lobes bringing down is the good part, and these are the suffering part. That's all. That's all, sir.
Very good. Yeah, very nicely presented.
Thank you,
So in
sir.
fact, let's take a few points that we should emphasize
Okay, sir.
in this lecture. One is that when you go from the linear, from the zero order hold or the sample and hold system to the linear interpolator,
Okay, sir.
the impulse response widens.
Okay.
Is that right? The impulse response widens. It goes from, which was initially, it was over only one sampling interval. Now the impulse response spans two sampling intervals. So in fact, you notice that because the impulse response widens, the frequency response gets more concentrated, as Professor Jayanti said. And therefore, the side lobes become weaker. But there is also a problem in the main lobe, there is a suppression again. So there's a bit of distortion that comes in the main lobe. That's also, so of course there's a compromise, there's always a compromise. However, the linear interpolator would give you a smoother signal, definitely. Because in the linear interpolator, the signal would be continuous after interpolation, as opposed to the zero order hold or the sample and hold, where the signal after holding will not be continuous. There would be discontinuities at every point of sampling. In contrast, in the linear interpolator, the resultant signal after interpolation is going to be continuous. Of course, its first derivative would be discontinuous. So, in fact, now you can also think of higher order holds. So, you can think of a second order hold, you can think of a higher order hold. And as you go to higher order holds, you would expect that more and more continuity is given, is assured in derivatives. So, for example, if you go to a second order hold, you would have continuity in the first derivative, and this can be continued. How do you get higher order holds? By repeated convolution with the zero order hold. So, they would continue to be linear shift invariant systems following the ideal sampler, in which we also admit further convolutions. That means the impulse response now spreads over more sample intervals. The impulse response lengthens, definitely. Now, another point which you notice here is that whether it is the zero order hold or whether it is the sample and hold, just the plain hold, or the first order hold where you have a linear interpolator, there's bound to be some contribution of the aliases. That means in the process of reconstruction with just a holding circuit, you cannot avoid the aliasing entirely. The aliases are not completely cancelled. So, some amount of distortion is bound to be there on account of the aliases. But of course, that distortion reduces as you go to a higher order hold. So, these are some of the comments. So, it's very well presented, very nicely presented by Professor Jayanti. And now, do we have any questions? Yes, any observations, questions, comments? Yeah, so there's a question from Professor Ashish. Why is there main lobe suppression? Well, what happens is, it's not main lobe suppression. We shouldn't call it main lobe suppression. You're squaring the response. So, you see, relative to the peak of the main lobe, naturally, the fractional value of any of the other points on the main lobe will go down. You see, any fraction which is less than 1 when squared reduces, isn't it? So, therefore, in the main lobe, you will find that the relative value of any point, any spectral point on the main lobe relative to the maximum of the main lobe is going to come down because of squaring. But on the other hand, the same thing is going to happen to the side lobes. The side lobes are also going to come down because of squaring. The contribution of the aliases is now reduced in this. And the effect of the higher order hold. You see, as you go to if you go to a second order hold, for example, you would be cubing the zero order hold response. So, you would have a further suppression of the side lobes, but then there would be some distortion in the main lobe, which you have to equalize. Yes. Any other questions or comments or observations?
Regarding sir, interpolation, how many samples, how many maximum samples we can allow, sir, without aliasing we can retrieve. Interpolating means we are going to increase the number of samples, right? So,
in interpolation, you don't necessarily increase the number of samples. What you do is put a fictitious curve in between samples. Now that when I say fictitious, I mean that may not be the original curve. So here neither in the sample and hold nor in the linear interpolator do we really get the actual signal. But we get a better approximation to the actual signal, hopefully, than simply having very narrow pulses. That is the thinking, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
we are putting artificially a curve in between samples to join. See, that's what you do when you draw a graph in high school. That's what you do. You do linear interpolation typically, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Typically, we do linear interpolation there.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Any other questions, comments, or observations on this presentation? And so Professor Ashish has a question. What is the real use of an interpolator? Well, the interpolator avoids the discontinuities that would be there if you simply left them as pulses. So in a way, the interpolator suppresses the aliases, but it cannot remove it. It cannot remove it entirely. It cannot remove it. An interpolator cannot. Only the ideal interpolator can remove the aliases completely. What would the ideal interpolator be? The ideal interpolator would be the low pass filter, which we talked about yesterday, even if there is a smooth fall off. But what is the problem with the ideal interpolator? It requires an infinite number of samples for the interpolation. It involves an infinite number of samples. It is of infinite length. The interpolator is of infinite length, which is of course unrealizable. It's also non-causal. And not only non-causal, it's infinitely non-causal. And further, it is unstable. So for all these reasons, we saw that yesterday, isn't it? The ideal interpolator is unstable, it's non-causal, it's not realizable.
So
yes.
Then why you are bringing this interpreter into this stuff? Yeah,
Well,
if it is kind of unreal, it needs.
No, ideal interpolator is what you strive to achieve.
Yes, sir.
But you try to go to it step by step by using realistic interpolators, like starting from the sample and hold, then the linear interpolator, and then higher order interpolators. But of course, when you know the ideal interpolator, you know where you need to reach. But you also know you can never reach it. That is the beauty of a lot of signal processing functions. You know which ideal you want to achieve, but you also know you will never achieve it because there are some fundamental problems. The ideal interpolator is unstable, it is irrational, and it is infinitely non-causal. So it cannot be realized, but then you can start approximating the ideal interpolator. In fact, the same is true of ideal filters. You cannot realize ideal filters, but you can go as close to them as you desire if you invest more resources.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, very good. So any other questions, comments? All right, so very good. So now we are at the end of the second cycle of presentations, and now we can commence with the third cycle of presentations. So we now very warmly invite Group 1 to make the next presentation.
Good morning, sir.
Very good morning.
Sir, I will be presenting.
Yes.
With your kind request, I will proceed further. So, I'm from Group 1, Mrs. Hemangi Kulkarni, presenting for the lecture 13. And now we are coming across the discrete time speech processing system in this lecture. So, up till now, what we have done, that in previous sessions, the concept of sampling is very clear. We are converting the continuous independent variable signals into discrete one. And again, we are not only converting, we are thinking about the reconstruction also. And we are already gone through the interpolators and how the filter frequency responses will be there. Then how the conversion of continuous into discrete will be there through the process of sampling. Then all the imposters and all generated, and then how to remove everything we have gone through now. But now instead of thinking going into these details, we are going towards the practical thing in the lecture 13. So what we need to discuss is the application of all these things into the speech signal. So for this, in the lecture, first it is discussed that the difference, what is the difference between digital system and a discrete system, because it is very important for the students. They have the confusion in their mind that sometimes we say digital signal and sometimes discrete signal, sometimes the systems we say digital, sometimes discrete. So what is actually the difference between these two? So discrete signal we have converted into discrete, means discrete signal is the independent variable that can take the discrete values, and by the process of sampling we are converting the continuous signal into discrete signal. After sampling we are having the discrete signal which can take the arbitrary real values, and that those values taken by the sample signal need to be further discretized, and we need to discretize the dependent variable too. So, and after that we get the digital signal. So we have gone through this in one presentation, that sampling, quantization, encoding, all the stages are there, and after that we get actually the digital signal. So actual after sampling we are not actually having the digital signal. We have to process it further, and it has to go through these stages to get actual digital signal. And why to go for digital system? So we already know that we are from analog era, we have been towards the digital era. So we are preferring all the digital systems now, and obvious advantages are there. Those are the flexibility. In the sense of flexibility, what we say that the digital systems are like what we are using, like computers and all the modules in which the softwares are there, or the facilities are there, which can be a small change in those systems make available for other applications also. So we can use them for different purposes by making small changes, and they are flexible enough so that we can use them for different purposes, and as compared to the analog systems. So analog systems are highly specialized and restrictive, whereas the digital systems are flexible in nature. And they are also, the digital systems are easy to maintain. Low maintenance is required for them. Like for analog systems, we have to replace the components, we have to build the circuits for different purposes, for different frequency responses. But here, maintaining the circuits is very easy. Digital ICs are available, they can be easily replaced. Again, the generality is there. So in designing the analog system for particular frequency response is challenging. Many times practically it is very difficult, but it is not the case in case of the digital systems. We can achieve the desired responses accurately using the digital systems, and we are having memory, and we can increase the complexity of processing also. So it is very immune to the noise also, and many more advantages of all the digital signals are applicable here. So we prefer the digital systems over continuous systems, and that's why we are going towards the to achieve the digital signal. So this is the background, and when we are having a digital signal, then we can think of processing it through the digital signal processors. Okay, so overall when we see that we were having, like practically digital systems are good, they are immune to noise, flexible, general, and easy to maintenance. But in case when we are having the signals by nature, or in the practical situation, we are having means we have to handle analog signals most of the times. So means continuous signals are available, but processing through digital systems is advantageous. That's why we are going through the sampling system. So we are available with the continuous variable signal, which are provided by different sensors, or in nature they are available. We pass those signals which are continuous in nature, we pass them through the sampling system, and means we sample them to achieve the discrete signal. So to discretize, we are using the sampling. Then when the discrete signal is available, we convert these samples into numbers. Like we compare with the nearest quantization level and we encode them into particular feasible numbering system. So the digital sequence is available at the output of this quantizer and encoder. So this digital input sequence can now processed by the digital signal processor. So the processing, like for example, compression may be there, maybe enhancement may be there. So when we consider the inputs like images, we can do many types of processing in this block. Then digital output sequence is available, which is processed through the DSP processor. And then we have to reconstruct from this digital sequence, we have to get back our original signal after processing. So it will be enhanced or it will be modified in some way, and we are having the continuous variable, which was like our original signal or somewhat processed. We are having it the output of this system. So when we do the sampling and this conversion of sample into some numbers, this process, this one is known as analog to digital conversion. And when we are doing the reconstruction from these samples, then we are actually getting back the original signal. So that is conversion of digital to analog. So in day-to-day life also, we are using many applications in which we call ADC or DAC, A to D converter or D to A converter. We are mostly using these. So when our continuous time signal was available, we have converted into discrete time, and we are able to process it using digital signal processor by employing the ADC and DAC. Further, now this was theoretical concept, but when we have to apply this concept to the practical scenario, we can choose a basic speech signal for using this system. So a speech processing system we will discuss further. Speech signal, as we all know, we come across every time. So that when we consider the frequency, speech signal is band limited to 4 kilohertz, means it has maximum frequency component 4 kilohertz. Then if we apply our Nyquist sampling theorem, then we can say that it can be sampled at the sampling frequency more than 8 kilohertz. And we have to keep some margin, as we have seen earlier. So keeping margin is better, means we can decide the sample frequency up to 10 kilohertz. So if we take sample frequency 10 kilohertz, then that means that we will record 10,000 samples per second for the speech signal. How the speech signal looks like. So when we talk some words, how that looks like when we observe the recorded speech signal with respect to time, we can see we can visualize that speech signal here. So how the spectrum of speech signal is there. So as I said that it is band limited to 4 kilohertz, we can see the spectrum of speech signal, which is band limited to 4 kilohertz. And when we sample, then the replicas are created, that imposters, those are created. This one is the original spectrum, and the imposters are there at the multiples of sampling frequency 10, 20, like that. So that shows the spectrum of sampled speech signal after sampling at 10 kilohertz. Then moving further, when we want to use a digital system for processing such speech signal, then we will need the input sequence which should be the samples of speech signal will pass through the discrete system, signal processing, digital signal processing system, and then we'll be having the output sequence, which is the processed samples of speech. Now, when we come across the topic A to D converters, most commonly we use the successive approximation ADC, that is the basic type which is discussed in the lecture 13. So the overview of successive approximation A to D converter, that is I'm discussing. Now the input analog samples are available. An analog comparator is used to compare these samples. Another input for comparison is from voltage combiner. So that provides with the another analog value of the approximated signal. So analog sample compared with the approximated value, and whatever is the result of comparison that we call as error, whatever is the comparison difference, that current approximation of the input, that is provided as current approximation of the input to the voltage combiner, and again will be used for the further comparison. So what the successive approximation does is compares with the approximated value and then tries to convert it into digital. So we are having the digital output, digital signal at the output of successive approximation. So it tries to pair with the nearest level and provide it as a digital output in the successive approximation method. If it is having lowest error, whenever it is having lowest error, that will be considered as the digital output. Then what kind of D2A converter we can use? The simplest example is given in the form of a resistive circuit in which there are number of voltage levels used. So, and the resistors are used, which are multiples, those are having the powers of 2. So as this is a digital to analog, means we are having a binary signal. So these resistors are taken as a power of 2, and it is a simple circuit where different voltage levels are provided. So if we consider the analysis of this, then the current through each branch we can find out using the Kirchhoff's laws. So the voltage, that is the sum of voltage, net voltage available minus each node voltage here, divided by the respective resistance will be the current through each branch. And when we consider the total current here, that is the sum of all the currents coming towards this, and then we want to get the current through RL, that is V net by RL, that is the summation of all these terms. And if we proceed further, then we can represent it in terms of all the multiples of resistors. So we consider it in the power of 2. So 2 raised to 0, 2 raised to 1, 2 raised to 2, 2 raised to 3, like all the resistor values we can take. So like this we represent the all the currents. So if we take the inverse of that resistances, then this becomes the conductance, and total conductance we can get G of L1, that is given by this equation, that is the summation of all these terms, individual conductance. And when we want to express the V net, now V net is our analog voltage. So if we want to express this V net, then we can represent it in terms of this conductance, and it is just, we can say, the multiple. We are having output voltage, which is the multiple of the input voltages, and this multiplier is changing. So MSB to LSB, V0 corresponds to the MSB and V3 corresponds to the LSB, and the V net, total V net, is proportional to the value of input binary number. So we are having analog voltage V net as the output for the whatever input binary number we are providing through switches or through some mechanism at the input side. Then the concept of frequency normalization is also discussed, which is very important. So when we consider one sampling interval to unit length of time, then now we know the sampling frequency is equal to the reciprocal of sampling interval. Okay, and now it will be equal to 1 unit of time. So again, it is equal to unity in case of normalized units. Okay, so to avoid the aliasing, according to the Nyquist theorem, we want the maximum frequency component less than 0.5. Okay, as we are considering in terms of time. So this will be, we can say in terms of angular frequency also. So this will be equal to 2 pi times the normalized cycles per second frequency, which can be clearly seen in this. So this is the speech signal frequency representation, we can see spectrum, and after sampling we are having these spectrums, and when we see the normalization, then we can see this angular frequency 2 pi, and here we have to choose this one as the to avoid the aliasing, that is from the Nyquist criteria. So that is nothing but the normalization from this frequency to pi. That is the frequency normalization when we consider in terms of unit. And again, as we are considering the practical systems in this chapter, we have to consider a simple diode circuit as an example. So, sir has given very nice example, that is taking the input as means if we consider this simple diode circuit as shown here, then output is 0 when input is less than equal to 0, and output is x of t when input is greater than 0. So according to the diode equation, we are having this output nVt log of xt by is into r plus 1. So that is according to the diode equation. So near about we are trying to represent the two signals 0 and xt in terms of this waveform. So as the time will change, each that value will be represented in terms of y of t. So this is a good example sir has demonstrated. So from this lecture, we can draw the conclusion like designing a system in digital domain is much easier. That's why we are going towards this as compared to the analog domain. And the digital systems provide they are providing better performance. They are not, they are less affected by noise, and they are not affected by the non-idealities of the component like the analog systems. So in analog systems, the components behavior that causes much trouble. So that is less in case of these digital systems. So that's what conclusion we can draw from this lecture. So that's all for the lecture 13. Thank you.
Very good, very nicely presented summary and exposition of lecture 13. So as I was saying, this is a very nice presentation by Professor Hemangi Kulkarni, and it beautifully brought out the whole idea. In fact, in Professor Hemangi's exposition, you must have noticed that we have now embarked upon the subject of digital signal processing. So you see, the whole idea of sampling gives you an entry into digital signal processing. So what is digital signal processing? It's a philosophy of processing in the discrete independent variable domain. What do you do there? You often deal with inherently continuous independent variable systems, or rather continuous independent variable signals, which are then discretized by sampling, and you process them through a discrete time system. Why do you do it? It was very clear from Professor Hemangi's presentation, because You gain in terms of flexibility, versatility, robustness, and much more variety in the kind of systems that you can implement. What you can do with discrete time systems is very difficult to do with analog systems. In fact, there are certain things you can do with discrete time systems which cannot be done with analog systems. For example, you cannot get linear phase in analog systems because you cannot have non-trivial finite impulse response systems. So in many ways, there is a lot of attraction in digital signal processing, with of course the provision that you have to deal with band limited signals. So in a way, you cannot entirely do away with aliasing, but we can live with it to the extent it's there and do a good job. So digital signal processing has been a subject in vogue for almost 50 years now, and a very, very successful subject. Much of what you do in digital systems today involves digital signal processing. So in this lecture, you had an exposition to the fundamentals of digital signal processing. Now, one important thing which Professor Hemangi brought out is the examples of how you do analog to digital conversion. One very well-known analog to digital converter is what is called a successive approximation converter. So there, you see, the advantage of a successive approximation converter is there you're able to take bit by bit. You keep converting one bit at a time. The most significant bit first, and you keep on refining your approximation bit by bit until you get to whatever number of bits you desire. She also presented one idea of a digital to analog converter by a linear combination. But there's one important point you must remember. At the junction, there should be a grounding, and it should be a virtual ground, and that can be provided by an operational amplifier operating in linear mode. Of course, that architecture requires resistors which are in values of powers of 2. So naturally, it starts spanning a very wide range if there are too many bits. So one has to do it more cleverly if one wants to go for a higher number of bits. So anyway, this is not the platform where we should be discussing the electronic circuits of analog to digital and digital to analog converters, but it is important. In a signal systems course, one must give a flavor of the circuits that are required for analog to digital conversion in sampling and digital to analog conversion in reconstruction. So any comments or questions or observations on this presentation? All right. In that case, we shall now proceed to the next presentation. That would be by group 2 on lecture 14.
Good morning all. Warm welcome to the 14th lecture of this workshop. Till now, in earlier sessions, we have seen how we can build the speech system and a discrete time processing system for the speech signal. So, Hemangi ma'am also explained it nicely in the presentation. So, here is the spectral situation, what we do have for the speech signal. At the center, that is centered about the 0 is the original spectrum, and on sampling the signal at 10 kilohertz, we can see here is the original spectrum, and here are the carbon copies or the aliases of the original spectrum. We can also write it as a normalized angular frequency that is shown over here. So this 5, it will correspond to a frequency of 1/2 into 2 pi, that is pi. Similarly, 4 will correspond to 0.8 pi in normalized frequency axis, 10 will correspond to 2 pi, and so on. Now shown is a simple example of a discrete time operation. Here, x of n is the input signal, and it produces the output y of n. The system here I have taken as S, which is a linear time invariant system. Actually, to represent the discrete time systems, we may have 3 ways. The first one is the block diagrams, which is similar to circuit schematic. It explains the signal flows and the operations which are being carried out on the signals. The second one is the difference equation. It simply relates the input sequence to the output sample sequence. And third one is as transfer function in the Z domain, which is very similar to the transfer function of Laplace domain. So of this shown here is a block diagram schematic for the system, whereby we are moving to the, we are using a discrete time system, and as soon as we are moving to the discrete time system, the unit of time we should consider is the sampling interval, and the unit of frequency should be the sampling frequency. Here as an example, I have considered a most simple discrete time system, where y of n, that is output of the discrete time system, is half of x of n plus x of n minus 1. That is the system averages current and the just past sample. Of interest is to know what the system would do to sinusoids of different frequencies. Instead of directly dealing with the sinusoids, it's good to deal with the corresponding complex exponentials or with rotating complex numbers. Very interesting thing is there is a physical meaning to the sinusoidal frequencies. The female voices have higher frequencies and male voices typically have lower frequencies. So if many or several people are speaking simultaneously, where some of them are male and some of them are female, then the likelihood is that much of the signal coming from the male speech will likely to come in the lower or the first half band, and much of the female speech content is likely to occupy the second half band. So if we are taking the band of 0 to 4 kilohertz, then mostly or typically the 0 to 2 kilohertz band will be occupied by the male speech signal, and the content of female speech signal will occupy for 2 to 4 kilohertz band. So here is the signal x of t, which is the speech signal, continuous time speech signal, which is sampled at the rate 1 by ts, where ts, 1 by ts is the 10 kilohertz. Now samples x of nts indicates the ts is the sampling interval and n is the integer. It may take any value. So after the sampling, I can write the signal as x of t into summation n running from minus infinity to plus infinity del of t minus mts. What this represents is a uniform train of impulses. So I can write the signal after sampling as summation n running from minus infinity to plus infinity of x of nts into del of t minus nts. If I take its Fourier transform, then by the definition of Fourier transform, I will have infinite integral from minus infinity to plus infinity of the signal whose Fourier is to be obtained, that is our sampled speech signal, into e raised to minus j omega t dt. Now to take the Fourier transform condition is the signal should converge, and as the speech signal has finite duration and finite energy, obviously it will converge, and hence we can take its Fourier transform. So here I will change the order of integration and summation. So firstly I will write for summation n running from minus infinity to plus infinity x of nts, because it is here it is dependent on this term x of nts. It depends on the n. Integration from minus n to plus infinity del of t minus nts into e raised to minus j omega t dt. Now here integration of this impulse, it represents nothing but the various interval at which we are taking the signal into account, and hence same expression I can rewrite as summation n running from minus n to plus infinity of x of nts into e raised to minus j omega nts. The thing which we have shown over here is the same thing shown graphically in the first slide, whereby we have shown for the aliases. So carbon copies or aliases, from where it comes, that is mathematically we have shown over here. In terms of normalization, x of nts, I can write it as e raised to minus j omega nts. I can write as e raised to minus j omega by 1 by ts into n, where this term omega by 1 by ts actually is 2 pi into actual cycles per second frequency divided by actual sampling frequency, and that is nothing but the normalized angular frequency omega. So the term omega by 1 by ts we can replace by omega, and hence we do have expression n running from minus n to plus infinity of x of nts into e raised to minus j omega nts, whereby nts I can write as n, and ts, omega ts we can replace by the small n. So I do have final definition of the discrete time Fourier transform as summation n running from minus n to plus infinity of x of n into e raised to minus j omega n. So what further we will see is what is the exact application of in discrete time Fourier transform in the next sessions. So that's all from my side. Thank you.
So very good, Professor Survase, very well presented, very nicely organized and presented. So in fact, Professor Survase has beautifully introduced to you the notion of a discrete time Fourier transform. So when you have a continuous time signal and you sample it, you get a sequence. Now you associate a discrete time Fourier transform with that sequence if, of course, that summation converges, the summation that she brought out towards the end of her presentation. And what is that summation really? It's really the same Elias spectrums, the original spectrum of the continuous time signal is now Elias to every multiple of the sampling frequency, and these Eliases are added. Now you need to think of this on a normalized frequency scale. That is what she explained to you. So you see, we don't want to keep changing the way we deal with the frequency when you change the sampling frequency. That's why we normalize the frequency. So the discrete time Fourier transform deals with a normalized frequency axis, where the angular frequency is divided by the sampling frequency, leading to an independence from the sampling frequency. That means now pi corresponds to the maximum signal frequency that there can be on the normalized angular frequency axis, and 2 pi corresponds to the sampling frequency. Now all our system design in the discrete time Fourier transform domain will be on this normalized angular frequency axis. We can formulate a design policy, a design philosophy based on the normalized angular frequency. Very good. So very well presented. Are there any questions, comments, or observations on this presentation? So you see, if you look at it, we are slowly building up a story here. A story of how you can go from continuous time or continuous independent variable to discrete independent variable and deal with it also in a transform domain. So when you teach the subject to a student audience, must build up the story in the same way. Must build it up step by step. Any other questions, comments, or observations?
Shall I add one comment?
Yes, 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 please. Yes.
It means that if we sample the signal in any domain, it becomes periodic in another domain. Shall we come into that conclusion, sir?
So when you sample the signal, that's a very good point. When you sample the signal in the original natural domain, the effect is that the original spectrum is taken, translated to every multiple of the sampling frequency, and these translates are added. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And therefore, you get a periodicity with, on the unnormalized frequency axis, you get a periodicity with period equal to the sampling frequency or sampling angular frequency if you're dealing with angular frequencies. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, yes, sir.
So in fact, yes, you're right. So, you know, when you sample in one domain, the natural domain, you're getting a periodic frequency spectrum in the other domain, right? Now, in fact, you can invoke the principle of Fourier duality here. So if you sample the spectrum you also get aliasing in time. And in fact, that's what you do when you write a Fourier series.
Yeah.
If you take the Fourier transform of one period and then sample that Fourier transform, you would be taking the original period and repeating it. And that's how you get a periodic signal in time. Is that right, Professor Velmurugan?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. So you could invoke duality and also get a dual principle for sampling. Very good. That's a very good question. Any other questions, comments, or observations on this presentation? All right. Yes, if there are no other comments, questions, or observations, we shall now take one more presentation. I think we can take a couple of presentations. So we'll take the next presentation. That would be by group 3.
Good afternoon, sir.
Very good afternoon.
This is Rakesh Sharma from PSG College of Technology. On behalf of group 3, I am doing a presentation on discrete time signal processing system.
Very good.
Let me share my screen, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, sir, for giving me opportunity to present here. This is lecture 15, discrete time signal processing system. Myself is Rakesh Sharma. My group members are Dr. G. Anandi, Dr. V. Prema, and Mr. R. Ramar Kalanjiam. This is an example of discrete time signal processing system. It consists of continuous conversion of you are given with the time domain signal, and then it will be sampled, and then it will be converted to discrete domain, and then it will be transformed using discrete time Fourier transform, and then you will get the output signal Y of n, and then conversion of sequence to impulse train, and then you will get Y of t. This is a overall system for filtering continuous time signal using a discrete time filter. This is a notion for continuous to discrete time conversion and discrete to continuous time conversion, and vice versa. This is a from your lecture, sir. I came to know that this is a discretization in time domain, meaning that you at integer samples of time, I'm getting the samples. So here, even though your signal h of omega exists beyond x of omega, we will be considering h of omega as null, and we will be considering only signals where x of omega exists. That is what is given in this picture. Minus fm to fm, your band limited signal. Since x of omega is band limited signal, x of omega exists in minus fm to fm. So we consider wherever x of omega exists, h of omega in this region only, and then we will get the y of omega also in this region. So going from continuous to discrete time signal processing, discrete time signal processing system does the following. It takes a continuous time band limited signal x of t and band limits to minus fm to fm, and samples at the rate of fs, which as per the Nyquist principle has to be greater than 2fm, which yields the input sequence x of nts. For convenience, we note this as x of n, x of nts as x of n, calling ts as a unit time. This is called as normalization. The input sequence x of n is fed to a linear shift invariant system with impulse response h of n to yield a output sequence y of n. So we have a knowledge of region of relevance for y of omega and h of omega. We cannot consider as such. We do restriction and normalization. First, we do restriction in the sense that we have the signal from minus omega m to omega m, minus omega m to omega m. Before taking dtft, we chop down to this region, and h of omega may be extend all over real omega. However, we chop it down to minus omega m to omega m. That is what restriction. And normalization is nothing but, as Sudha madam said, we consider as sampling frequency is twice that of message frequency. We consider minus omega s by 2 to omega s by 2, and this region is called normalized normalized region, we consider DTFT only in this region. Instead of minus omega m to omega m, we consider minus omega s by 2 to omega s by 2, where omega s stands for sampling frequency. This is done because we are encompassing more number of samples to get actual signal. So all over the frequencies in this region proportionally mapped in minus omega s by 2 to omega s by 2. We map minus omega s by 2 to omega equal to minus pi in angular frequency and omega equal to pi for omega s by 2. So this is what is discrete time Fourier transform does. Here your inputs, so this is the whole system representation. X of n is input sequence and process with this in h of omega, corresponding impulse response h of n equal to inverse DTFT of h of omega. The inverse DTFT of h of omega is nothing but h of n. So this all done in software domain. This is not a hardware. This is all done in software domain. So digital to analog conversion is done. After getting y of n, digital to analog conversion is done to get using reconstructor to get y of t. Example of constructing a discrete time system equivalent to an RC filter. So here I feed a continuous time signal at a frequency 10 kilohertz FM. I consider this system h of omega as a RC filter, because RC filter resistor in parallel with the capacitor is nothing but a low pass filter with a time constant of tau equal to RC. You will get an output continuous time signal. So here I consider 3 kilohertz. I will tell you why. Here here I consider input Fourier transform as V of t as V of omega, and output for signal Fourier transform as V out of omega. So here V out of omega by V in of omega equal to transfer function 1 by j omega c divided by r plus j omega c, which is equal to 1 by 1 plus j omega rc omega. This is nothing but I call it rc as tau 1 by j tau rc. So a frequency response of the has a magnitude 1 by square root of 1 plus j square omega square. So this is all about filter, that is a hardware representation of your system. So significance of this some frequencies. See significance of from frequency. I substitute omega equal to 1 by tau. So the magnitude response becomes 1 by square root 2. Whatever you feed, this is known as half power frequency. Whatever if you feed a sine wave with the power p, the half of the power is received. This is known as half power is proportional to the voltage squared. Hence, the power in the output sinusoid at angular frequency 1 by tau is half of that power in the input sinusoid. That is what is the conclusion. Then K power point frequency. I call modulus of h of the omega square as K is equal to 1 by square 1 plus tau square omega square. So 1 plus tau square omega square is equal to 1 by K. Tau square equal to, we can write it as rearrange the terms and to get 1 by tau square into K 1 by K minus 1. Omega is equal to square root of 1 by tau square into 1 by K minus 1. So omega equal to 1 by tau into square root of 1 by K minus 1. For K, substituting K equal to 0.1, we fall 10% of the input power. The frequency at which this happens is omega equal to 3 by square root of 3 by tau. This is why we have said earlier that 1 by tau is equivalent to 3 kilohertz. 1 by tau is equivalent to 3 kilohertz. That is a time constant of system is said to be RC is equal to 3 kilohertz. We have said earlier. So it has to be equal to the corresponding angular frequency and not the cycles per second frequency. Therefore, 1 by tau equal to 2 into 2 pi 3 kilohertz. Therefore, RC filter is a low pass filter where at the 9 kilohertz the power falls to 10% at 3 kilohertz and 50% respectively, and so on. Power falls at 10% at 3 kilohertz and goes on increasing. It goes on increasing 50% and so on. So description of equivalent discrete time RC filtering process. So consider HF. So we consider in analog domain. Next we represent the RC filter in discrete time domain. So we know h of omega equal to 1 by 1 plus j omega j tau omega. In terms of representing, in terms of, as Sudha ma'am said, omega is equal to omega is equal to angular frequency divided by Ts. So substituting this here, so we are normalized this to minus. So we normalized omega to pi. So it represents omega is equal to discrete transform omega into 2 pi divided by omega s. This is equal to omega divided by fs. This is equal to omega into ts, where omega equal to omega divided by ts. H of omega is equal to 1 by 1 plus j tau omega by ts. This is what is the conclusion. So the input response h of n, by taking dtft, one will get h of omega, which would be complicated. We can on the other hand make an approximation. We could think of the filter as an ideal low pass filter with where omega equal to 3 by tau, which is equal to 9 kilohertz, is in the stop band, and omega equal to 1 by tau, 3 kilohertz in the pass band. So your filter allows 3 kilohertz to 9 kilohertz. We choose a cutoff frequency to be somewhere between 6 kilohertz. The TT does an almost ideal low pass filter. So this is about discrete time signal processing system. So discrete time signal processing system is nothing but you are representing a system converting analog to digital domain is continuous time processing, and digital to analog conversion is discrete time processing. The between process is known as discrete time processing system. So that is what is the conclusion, sir.
Yes, very good. So very nice. So Professor Rakesh Kumar has beautifully explained one example where you could take a continuous time system and truncate its frequency response to lie within the interval in which you could stop presenting now, Professor Rakesh Sharma. So you've taken a beautiful example of where you take an RC system, you could truncate that response to lie within the interval of interest, that is minus FM to plus FM. And you could think of that as the response of your discrete time system in the fundamental band from minus pi to pi on the normalized frequency axis. Now, of course, finding out the inverse discrete time Fourier transform in this case could be fairly complicated. But you could think of this broadly again as a low pass characteristic in the normalized angular frequency domain, and then you could approximate it. So anyway, the whole idea here was to show how you could approximate or how you could replace a continuous time system by an equivalent discrete time system by truncating the frequency response to lie between 0 and the band limit. Very good. So any questions, comments or observations on this lecture presentation? So very nice. We'll take one more presentation before we conclude, before we break for lunch. So we'll take one more presentation. We'll now have group 4 presenting. Yes.
We are actually from group 4, and we have given the topic conclusion of module 3.
Yes.
And I'll be presenting behalf of my. So till now we have seen that a discrete system, and we have discussed about discrete systems, and we have also seen an example for RC circuit, which behaves as a low pass filter in terms of analog systems. In this lecture, in this conclusion of module 3, sir has told about a replacement of that analog RC system with its equivalent discrete system. So we have seen that RC circuit for a speech signal having a band of 4 kilohertz from total band of 8 kilohertz. We have seen that half power point occurs at 3 kilohertz, and at 9 kilohertz it is 10% power point. So if this is the signal for speech processing as a low pass filter, in discrete time domain we can have a similar kind of low pass filter with its specification in terms of its bandwidth, that is in terms of omega. So if we take the cutoff frequency as 6 kilohertz, which is in between 3 and 9, And if we convert it into in terms of omega, we will get it as pi by 2. That is the normalized frequency. So from minus pi by 2 to pi by 2, we can have a low pass filter. And on the left side of the screen, you can see the ideal low pass filter with magnitude of 1 from minus pi by 2 to plus pi by 2, and it is 0 elsewhere. So this can behave similar to RC analog circuit, which is having a low pass characteristics. And if you see in terms of by taking inverse DTFT, we can see that in time domain we have a sinc function, and we can, by increasing the height of this rectangular pulse, we can, or by increasing the width of this rectangular pulse, we can change the characteristics of that sinc function. But this is just an approximate to the RC circuit, because we have taken the magnitude to be equal to 1, which is an ideal case. So to get an exact response, impulse response, we can just directly take the impulse, the transfer function of the RC circuit, and we can convert it in terms of discrete domain, and we can get the inverse DTFT of this in order to get the impulse response. So we can use this particular function or impulse response, which behaves the same way as that of the RC analog circuit. And finally, the output which we get will be the convolution of the input signal and this impulse response. So in conclusion of to module 3, sir has mainly focused by saying that most of the continuous time signals are found in real life, but discrete time signals are not found that much, except for economic and financial examples like the bank interest, or, and also sir concentrated by saying that continuous time signal are difficult to process and they are less robust, because as I mentioned that in software you can change the height of the rectangular pulse or you can change the width of the rectangular pulse, but in hardware you will have to change the components, that is R and C. And it is also less robust because R and C is mainly having its characteristics based on the operating temperature and current, etc. So it can change its behavior unless it is good, robust RNC. Otherwise, it is prone to temperature changes. And then the operations on the discrete time signals are more flexible. So as I mentioned, in the programming, you can change the height and the width of the rectangular pulse, but in hardware, you will have to change the components and it is not that flexible. So this is the conclusion of the complete module 3, where sir has discussed about an equivalent low pass filter to the analog RC low pass filter. So that is it from the conclusion of module 3 lecture, sir.
Very good. So this was lecture number 16, is that right?
16, yes sir, 16.
Very good. Very good. So now Person Amrita Pai has beautifully concluded module 3, that is the third part of signals and systems, where she's explained how by moving from continuous to discrete time, you get flexibility, versatility, and robustness on many counts. And she's also explained how you could do both an exact representation or an approximate representation of the low pass filter, the RC low pass filter. So this is in fact a very good time to break for lunch, because we have come to the end of the third dimension of signals and systems, of a signals and systems course, namely the connection between continuous and discrete time systems and signals. So we have built up yesterday from the point of sampling and reconstruction up to discrete time systems, and we've introduced the subject of digital signal processing to the audience. Yes, Professor Velmurugan has a question. Yes.
Yes, the impulse response obtained from this method will be an infinite one, yes.
Yes, it could be an infinite length response.
We are trying to build a IAR filter only.
Well, in this case, if you want an ideal, if you want to exactly get that RC response between minus pi and pi, then of course you would need to use an infinite length filter. In fact, the problem is it may not even be realizable. The exact filter may not be realizable. You know, so you need to approximate that again.
Okay. So if you want to design FIR means that will be a different procedure, sir.
Well, you could see even the IIR filter, the ideal, yeah, you could take the ideal filter and then you could design an FIR filter which approximates it.
Okay.
Right? You could design an FIR filter which approximates it with different kinds of approximations. It could be, you know, essentially approximation by windowing, or it could be approximation by the Park-McClelland's method and so on.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Right?
Thank you, sir.
So we will begin the next session at 4 p.m. with a presentation by Group 7 on lecture 17. Is that right, Group 7? Yes, and of course, Professor Narayan Marathe is requesting for an extension. Yes, we will be extending the deadlines of the graded assignments. Yes, that's right. And yes, so now we shall conclude the session and we'll reconvene at 4 p.m. And we'll reconvene by first having a presentation from Group 7 on lecture 17, followed by a presentation by Group 8 on lecture 18. Is that right, Group 8?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, very good. So we'll now conclude this session and we'll reconvene at 4 p.m. I wish you a very happy lunch break and I'll conclude this session.